All right. Today I have three things for you. The first is a cartoon. The second is an excerpt from something larger, which I can't find. I can only find the excerpt. And the third is something that I was able to find that is related to part of the excerpt. Is that vague enough for you? The first is very short. The second is, it's not really long, but it's the longest. And the third is in between the first and the second. Is that vague enough for you? Okay, so let's get into it. The first thing is a cartoon. It looks like this. So if you happen to be just listening to me right now, you would read Life's Like That by Fred Neher. You would see like there's 4 babies in cribs, like young babies-ish. I think it's supposed to be like at the hospital. And the first 3 babies that are in their cribs are holding their bottles with their hands. Then there's a final baby who has his hands in the air and he's holding the bottle with his feet. And then there's a caption at the very bottom that says, "Look, no hands." And there's a caption up here, which is I think probably like the more important caption, and it says, "Us moderns." So I guess it's like modern people have to do everything different, which like makes sense because in the era of like Eliot, Joyce, Pound, Woolf, the phrase of modernism was make it new. Make it new? I think it's, yeah, make it new. Make anew? I think it's make it new. So, yeah. And then there's like a handwritten thing on the back here that I need to read. So here's the cartoon. And the back says, supposedly published in the Chicago Daily News, Friday the 13th of June, 1941. Life's Like That cartoon by Fred Neher, 1903 to 2001. And then in parentheses, many have long searched for more data, but the infosphere is not what it once was. The informaton could only grasp a fragment. Okay, that's the cartoon. Now, I'm going to read an excerpt and the excerpt is from The Portraitist Who Grew Hands by Hugh Y. Acetane. And like, I don't know, anytime I read fiction, I just kind of try to get lost in it and see what arises. You know, I'm gonna drink a little tea, a little green tea. So let's see if we can't get lost together. I was born handless, with 2 elongated finger-like appendages. This has been ample for an awfully long time, but I now desire the sensation of cleaning dirt from under my fingernails. When I was a child, the bullies once harassed me into believing I was born more like a sea creature than a land walker. They were right about one thing. I would never know a bride. Even during these ecstatic moments of bullying, the intrigue of hair would overwhelm me as I inspected the dense, follicled forests sprouting down the arms of those who shoved and slammed me. These moments of anger became slices of time into which I could study what it might be like to be adorned with nature's furry raiment. I carry a bundle of doubt deep within my chest, reserved for those who think they know the whatness and the likeness of my slipperiness, though I know you would never think in that manner. You could never convince yourself that you were the bar of soap sliding along the shower floor, trailing suds from your body, soon to be asymmetrically grasped. It is because of this uneven agency that you requested for me to gather my books, smock, and bore brush to engage in a lost art. Self-portraits are difficult because a single one will not do in my case. At least 4 are required. We might start in the spring turn so that we reach an end by winter tide. The first would be perhaps how you imagine me now, a hairless and ambidextrous bimembrum. The second might surprise you, for the portrait would contain little shoots of keratin, sprouting topside and bottom side, blooming like falling dominoes all along my fings. The third would repulse you. I wish to not tell you, but the fourth would be impossible to imagine without understanding the third. In the third self-portrait, you would notice, although it would require close inspection, globules of slime encapsulating each stalk. The slime is composed of a lipid layer containing an aqueous layer, which holds safe the innermost layer of mucus. You might know this slime by another name. Perhaps now you understand why I was seen as belonging to the swarm of living creatures who dwell in the waters below. Once, after a particularly cruel act of attempted dismemberment, I thrust myself into the sea, perhaps partly hoping to find my father in the belly of a whale, but mostly hoping to find suffering's end. I remember the feeling of my fins swiping through the ocean's embrace, as if I had been raptured into a place where no net could catch me up. It was placeless, breathless, and inhospitable to any form of lingering. I awoke in a barbadal bed in the east wing of the salon, but could not find my attention giver. The first memory I have of the salon was being told quite bluntly that my fings cried hair, as my attention giver smiled pleasantly at me above the barber doc's left shoulder. The second memory was learning of my inability to release liquid from my eyes, like the bullies and brides, due to an odd conjunction of biotech involving the extension of my axillary tail of Spence, the intentional fusion of the ancestral dependent gene flows of the Huns and Musks, and the operation of a private equity-funded orphanage attached to a cattle farm by the coast, concealing research on marine suckling. At times, my memories are too much to bear. I suppose you could say my house stores a sadness impossible to glimpse through its windows, a sadness only glimpsed in the pre-dawn hours of meteor showers and night terrors. Sometimes when I dream, I transform into an awful creature who awakes to find itself stuck upside down on its armor-like back. I use 1,000 fings on each side of my carapace to right myself, as if the metamorphosis was just a joke. Other times, I am born with hands and forced to do physical labor, such as carpentry or gardening. These dreams go on for a long time, and I become quite skilled at the antiquated tasks, pictured to this day in salons. The attention taker is impressed at how little direction is required when I am handed a tool for the first time. I have never been handed anything before, besides my destiny. And even that was fumbled. Self-portraiture may be a dead art form, but I care enough to at least try to pass it on. The final portrait bears the image of how I will be known to posterity. I will be standing with my things behind my back. You will not notice how handless I am. Yet, it is growing late, and I cannot think much longer. I have spent so many waking and dreaming hours considering my state and how others perceive my being thrown into the world beside them. Now that my telomeres have grown short and I am soon to enter the hyper-hollow, it is quite often that a new acquaintance never even notices my handlessness until I bring it up. When I was younger, trying to be brided, it would take around 25 Passovers before my things came into conversational view. The views were always similar events involving many questions about how I could possibly manage to exist in such a state, followed by answers via self-realizations. How do you drive? Oh, I suppose it is just a press. How do you work? Well, I guess it is just blinks and swipes. How would you love me? I suppose you cannot grasp. I became well versed in grasping goodbyes. In the salon, there is a flat tune from about 300 years ago, picturing the babies of moderns. Although there has been an ever-evolving argument the past 30 years about whether it's from the flats, the posts, the metas, the hypers, or the re's. For my two globes, I think it was the late posts, ironizing the overly sincere early metas, who tried too hard to live in oscillation rather than simply participate. These babies are cradled and in a neat line. The last baby expresses an extra simian quality, holding his bottle with his feet. He exclaims a phrase I know well. Look, no hands. For me to be truly known, as you might look upon me in my fourth self-portrait, is for me to stand in a puddle of tears. My body cries every hour on the hour. Every hour, I leave a trail of slime so smooth that it slides out between every object that has ever tried to create friction between my things and the cosmos. In this final portrait, you would see me standing at attention, without giver or taker, simultaneously handless and thingless, simply shouldered, with a nortonomous puddle between my feet. On the wall above me would be a frame with a first pressed repro page, and if you binocked in, you would find these words. Now does my project gather to a head. My charms crack not, my spirits obey, and time goes upright with his carriage. I wonder if you could know me in this way. More importantly, I wonder if you could trust a man who it was impossible to shake hands with. It is for this reason that I am currently growing hands. It is incredible what responds when you call out with proper authority. Before I leave this place, I wish to know what it is like to be trusted. There are so few who can speak to this reality today, despite all our pretending with handshakes and high fives. We still watch VODs of driving the Alcan highway, where they would pull levers to pump gasoline and then stroll around before exchanging currency. The world of men with hands and chests is gone, lost in the war for the meteors. We used meteors to win meteors. It would have been more ironic if we hadn't been using guns and swords to get more guns and swords for at least 500 years at this point. Chimpanzees used tooth and claw to get berries and enough time to groom one another. We lost sight of ourselves in the shadows of the meteors. Another golden age glossed in the margins. It was around then that portraiture was lost for good until 20 years ago. It had been dying for an age already. The trees and soil all got allocated. Carpentry and gardening became not just antiquated, but thousand-globed hobbies like falconry and horseback riding. Can you imagine being a creature like that? What must it feel like to participate in the knitting together of will and desire at the behest of one higher than you? Nearly every hobby today is centered on anti-gravity and floating, irregardless of the amount of dirt and debris suspended in our atmosphere. Float stepping was the very first time a bully gripped me. The attention taker handed out pears to every kid, not expecting how my things would completely imbalance the quantum equations which had been chalkboarded out for beings with arms. I fell upwards, slipping on air, and got stuck in a somersault at exactly noon as my things blotted out the sun with a million wet, hairy tears. From then on, I was the target. It is quite incredible what you can discover in hiding places where boredom is on your side and cardboard boxes of chalk have been abandoned because all the equations were solved decades ago. I began to use my greatest shame to turn my hidey holes into Neolithic painted caves with the help of the hair and slime my body refused to hold on to. What started as the mega-pointillistic passing of time grew into the recovery of a tradition. I fell in love with Rococo, where everything is adorned, and started my way into mastering how they turned their age into a mirage. I believe you first saw my Pichon and Gihon after I had unceremoniously hung it in the float. Just another object in a sky full of garbage, which spurred this all into action. It is unfortunate that I am now growing hands and unable to complete your request. Trust me when I say that once my hands are complete, I will pick up my brush as if it is an alchemist's pestle and begin the self-portrait in 4 parts. Upon completion, I can only imagine many commissions will soon follow, my very essence being at last brought into the world, and, as the philosopher says, arousing envy not only in the brutes, but also in the stars and even in intelligences beyond the world. Oh, what a marvelous world it is. An excerpt from The Portraitist Who Grew Hands by Hugh Y. Ascertain. Okay. Thing 1, Thing 2 have been shown, presented. Now for Thing 3. The third thing was the hardest to find. I just want you to know. I spent a long time in the library, but I found it. You know when you go to like an art gallery? I don't know, there's got to be like a, I don't know, technical, pretentious term. I just don't know it. Although I do love technical, pretentious terms. So like there's like the piece of art, painting or whatever it is, and then there's like the little like description. I just don't know what the word for that description thing is, because that's what I found. That's what I have. The piece of art that's referenced in that excerpt, the Pishon and Gihon, I have the description. So that's what this is. And then there's like it's very, very short, but there's like a second description, a longer description. I don't know these art terms. So that's the third thing. And then we're out of here. Okay. Designation. Pishon and Gihon. And that's like Pishon is Pishon, and then Gihon is Gihon. I'm probably pronouncing the words wrong. I'm not really sure. So designation, Pishon and Gihon. Maker, Informaton still searching. Approximate date, late allocation period. Process, manual accretion using keratin, mucus-based binding agents, and pigmented chalk. Display condition, anti-gravitational suspension. Status, complete. Location, in the Float's permanent non-hollow gallery. The artist declined inclusion in the hyperhollow during his final days. And now like the second description, it's like a couple paragraphs. This work is recognized as a final artifact of the portraitist who grew hands, produced shortly before the artist's documented acquisition of full self-functionality. At the time of its making, portraiture was widely regarded as obsolete, having been displaced by automated likeness generation and proxy recognition systems. Pishon and Gihon was assembled through repeated manual gestures performed without hands, resulting in a surface that resists both friction and immediate comprehension. Contemporary analysis identifies the technique as a revival of trompe-l'oeil. I don't speak French. Trompe-l'oeil illusionism, adapted to materials sourced directly from the artist's body. The process required deep isolation and sustained attention, conditions uncommon during the allocation period. Archival records indicate that the artist understood portraiture not as depiction, but as an act requiring mutual trust between maker and viewer. The absence of a central figure was intentional. Viewers were expected to infer presence through labor, residue, and scale rather than through resemblance. The work was finished 1 year before the artist's transition into symmetrical grasp capability. Subsequent statements suggest that the maker declined to complete any more pieces until hands were fully formed, asserting that true portraiture required the possibility of being trusted in return. However, there is not currently any evidence that they ever began, let alone finished, another piece. Pichon and Guéhin is now cited as evidence that the re-emergence of manual practice preceded, rather than followed, the restoration of social reciprocity. Auto-generated per Grok PT, 92.03.01. All right. Thanks for stopping by.